Welcome back for another episode of App Stories. Today's episode is brought to you by Pillow, ZocDoc, Issue, and Squarespace. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hi, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
Doing really well. You know, we had so much fun with part one of our Gone But Not Forgotten series that we thought we would follow it up. We've got more that we came up with. Plus, I polled some of our listeners in Mastodon to ask them what apps they have forgotten about, or not forgotten about for that matter, and miss. And so we've got a lot to go through today. Here we are. We had the Mac Story Selects Awards that kind of got in the way of doing these back to back. But I think we should just dive right into some more apps. You want to take turns on this?
All right. Yeah. Where do you want to start?
Well, I'm going to start. I think maybe we should kind of pick categories, because I think I see here we've got some productivity apps, we've got some games, we've got some kind of like chat and communication type apps. So I'm going to start with productivity, and I'm going to pick Bento, because Bento is one of those apps that's really, it's an Apple app at the end of the day, because it's made by FileMaker, and FileMaker is a database app for the Mac. And Bento was kind of like its little brother. It's like the consumer version that allowed you to create databases, and maybe you collected comic books, or you were inventorying your house, or I don't know, keeping track of the books that you read. It was in some ways the precursor to a lot of the apps we see today, which are things like Sofa, that will let you track all sorts of media that you're watching, or some of the TV tracking apps, or book tracking apps. I mean, it shares elements of those, but it was much more powerful than those in the sense that you could do whatever you wanted with it. You could create a database of whatever you wanted. And this app was discontinued eventually, both on the Mac and on iOS, because it was on the iPad, I believe. But yeah, that was Bento.
Yeah, that was, I remember Bento, and I think there's actually a new Bento on the App Store today, but it's like a third-party app made by a different company. It's a task manager, I think.
I think you're right.
Not related at all to the original Bento. And I actually think that FileMaker is still an Apple subsidiary.
It
is.
It is.
It's still a deal that they have going on for reasons that I don't fully understand.
It's interesting to me why they would, of all the companies that Apple has acquired over the years, why that one particular one is still kept as a separate subsidiary. Who knows? You'd have to ask their lawyers, I guess. But Bento was always one of those apps that I thought, like, this is an app I'd like to be able to use, but I never found a good use for it really myself.
Yeah.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Pillow. More and more studies show that getting a good night's sleep can help improve your health and overall well-being in more ways than one. Pillow is a simple app that can help you become more aware of your sleep patterns and make informed decisions that will help improve that sleep quality. All you have to do is wear your Apple Watch while you sleep. Pillow will track and analyze your sleep automatically and give you a full report in the morning. If you want to use Pillow with just an iPhone or an iPad, you can do that too, with a press of a button before going to bed. If you have an Apple Watch, you can also get important information about your heart rate trends, variability, heart rate dip, and blood oxygen levels for each sleep session. You can even record sounds that occur during the night, including sleep talking, sleep apnea, snoring, or other noises that might be affecting the quality of your sleep. If you have an Apple Watch Series 6 or newer, Pillow can display information about the intensity of those sounds and give you a rating of each exposure. Another valuable aspect of Pillow is helping you make informed decisions to improve your sleep. Pillow comes with a dedicated section where you can discover trends, get personalized insights, sleep tips, and easily compare your sleep metrics with your weight, steps, caffeine consumption, and other metrics. If you want to wind down and relax before going to sleep, or listen to something throughout the night, Pillow also comes with an expanding collection of sleep aid sounds, guided meditations, bedtime stories, and music produced specifically for sleep. Naps can help boost your productivity, focus, and well-being too. And if you have a chance to take one, check out Pillow's Power Nap mode. Pillow even wakes you up using your iPhone, Apple Watch, or iPad at the lightest possible sleep stage using its smart alarm feature. And starting with watchOS 6, it uses minimal battery too. Last but not least, Pillow is privacy-minded. All of your sleep and audio data are encrypted and stored on your device and in your iCloud storage account using end-to-end encryption. You don't have to sign up for an account to use Pillow either. You can use it anonymously, and it won't collect or send your personal data anywhere else. Pillow is free to download from the App Store and comes with a set of great features that you can use every day for free. But if you want to try Pillow's premium features, there's also a 7-day free trial. Just visit pillow.app to get started today. Again, that URL is pillow.app. Our thanks to Pillow for their support of the show.
All right. In terms of productivity, I really want to mention Growl. Is it Growl?
Yeah, Growl. No, it's Growl. Yeah,
Growl. So this is really a blast from the past. So Growl used to be a notification system for macOS or macOS 10, I suppose, that was available before Notification Center, before the modern style of notifications on the Mac. Growl was already a thing when I switched to the Mac in 2008. That was a couple of years before actually a year before I started Mac Stories. And so the idea behind Growl was that you could get this these temporary notification banners, really reminiscent of iPhone notifications, that would pop up from the top right corner of the screen. And the thing about Growl was that you could customize the system with themes made by third-party designers and developers. You could make your own theme, and you could associate a bunch of different actions for, when you clicked on a Growl notification banner. Eventually, Apple came up with Notification Center, right? They did Notification Center on the Mac, and I believe that was Lion when they did the whole Back to the Mac initiative, and they brought Notification Center from the iPhone to macOS 10. And so at that point, we all thought, oh no, Growl is being Sherlocked, right? Because Apple is making their own notification system for macOS. And initially, if memory serves right, the Growl developers actually added Notification Center compatibility to Growl. And so you could use the two things at the same time. But very quickly, adoption from third-party developers basically disappeared from Growl. And if you had a Mac app that wanted to send notifications, why would you use a third-party notification system instead, right? That required adopting like a third-party SDK
right,
instead of just using the native notification APIs made by Apple, right? So that's why eventually it was no longer necessary to use Growl, and but it's something I remember. I remember wasting way too much time looking up themes for my Growl setup.
Yeah. I used Growl on and off at various points myself. Another app we should talk about is one that it played a very big part in your writing career, I know, which is editorial. Because you wrote a very long review / how-to for editorial that ended up being published on the bookstore for Apple Books. Yeah. And the thing about editorial was that it was one of these early apps that allowed you to do all sorts of automation. And it really went much farther than anything that was ever out there before. You could do. I never used editorial a lot. I used it a little bit when I started out at Mac Stories, but even by then it was kind of on a slower release schedule, and eventually it was just not updated any longer.
Man, I can go on and on about editorial. So many memories. Editorial was made by the creator of Pythonista. I believe Pythonista is still on the App Store. Not sure how frequently it is updated these days, but it's made by a German indie developer, Ole Zorn. And so Pythonista is where I got to know Ole through Pythonista. I started using Pythonista, and I learned a bit of Python actually when it was part of my whole sort of origin story with the iPad. I started using the iPad, and to overcome some of the limitations of iOS at the time, iPadOS was not a thing. To overcome some of those limitations, I started using Python scripting and Pythonista. And I remember that was late 2012. And in 2013, Ole, I still remember like when he told me, he was like, hey, I'm actually thinking about turning the Python engine behind Pythonista into a markdown text editor based on automation. And basically, Ole explained this vision in Twitter DMs. I still remember this. They are lost to history, I'm sure. The theory was like, I want to take on Sublime Text. If you recall, at the time, Sublime Text was like the hot thing in terms of text editing and customization with plugins and whatnot on macOS. And he wanted to make an iPhone and iPad version of that. And so the first version of editorial actually in the beta was different from what ended up shipping. Initially, Ole had this idea for creating workflows in editorial. So it was always visual automation with Python scripting as a special like scripting step. Much like you have visual automation in shortcuts, but if you want, you have a JavaScript step. That was the idea. You have visual actions, but if you want, you can also code. But initially, in one of the early betas, the visual editor was not like Automator and was not like what shortcuts would eventually be. It was more similar to Quartz Composer. You had this grid of blocks that you connected via arrows. Sort of like you can make workflows in Alfred today.
Yeah.
You know, that was the UI. But anyway, then editorial shipped and I tested editorial for like 9 months. And when it ended up shipping in August 2013, yes, because Ole told me about it in November 2012.
Wow.
I was doing radiotherapy as part of my final treatments at the time. Yes. And he told me November 2012 and it shipped in August 2013. And in those 9 months, that was like one of my fondest like periods in terms of testing something that I knew was going to be a big deal. And it was, because it fundamentally changed. Editorial invented a category, which was like visual automation on the iPad. Without editorial, I strongly believe we wouldn't have workflow and we wouldn't have shortcuts today. Like that was the beginning, just a single guy. And it was me and a bunch of other people testing editorial. I think at the time it was me and Gabe Weatherhead of MacDrifter.com. And a bunch of others. Brett Terpstra, I think, was also testing editorial. A few other brave souls. But I strongly believe that Ole, like he single-handedly created a category of apps and launched a new generation of software on iPad, which eventually grew into a bunch of different directions, right? It's why you have stuff like workflow and shortcuts. It's why you have complex apps like Marvis, for example, on the platform today. And Obsidian, obviously.
And drafts. I think it inspired some of the actions and drafts, yeah.
At the time, that was incredible. Like 10 years ago, to have that kind of desktop class experience in an app that was iPhone and iPad only, it felt, I can tell you, those first betas, they felt incredible. And it's, I mean, like I said, I can go on, but yeah, I miss editorial, man. I miss it so much.
Yeah, it's really remarkable that it was just a single person too. I mean, it's really quite an accomplishment. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by ZocDoc. When someone is exceptionally good at what they do, it could be a waiter, a chef, or a doctor, you know you're in good hands. It's like seeing a waiter balance 5 trays of sizzling fajitas on one arm. You're confident in them. And when you find the right doctor, you can feel it. You feel heard and at ease. On ZocDoc, finding the doctor that's right for you is seamless. The quality care you need is just a few taps away in the ZocDoc app. ZocDoc is the only free app that lets you find and book doctors who are patient-reviewed, take your insurance, and are available when you need them, and treat almost every condition under the sun. As I'm sure a lot of listeners know, I just moved to North Carolina, and I didn't have any doctors. I didn't have a dentist. I didn't have a general practitioner. I really didn't have anybody to take care of me and my family. And it's hard to find those professionals to get the care that you need. But I use ZocDoc, and what's nice about it is it's really easy to find all those kinds of doctors in a single place and be confident that they take your insurance and, important things like that. It's a great experience. Before you know it, you've got appointments with exactly the kinds of professionals that you need. With ZocDoc, there's no more doctor roulette or scouring the internet for questionable reviews. With ZocDoc, you have a trusted guide to connect you to the right doctor who will be your favorite doctor who you haven't met yet. Millions of people use ZocDoc's free app to find and book a doctor in their neighborhood who is patient-reviewed and fits their exact needs and schedule that's just right. So, if you need to find a doctor, head on over to ZocDoc.com/appstories and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then, find and book a top-rated doctor today. Many are available within 24 hours. That's ZocDoc.com/appstories. ZocDoc.com/appstories. Our thanks to ZocDoc for their support of the show. Let's list off a few that I heard about from our friends on Mastodon.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of apps and games that people miss, and one of them is Transmit by Panic, which I think you could still technically download it, but
and Coda by Panic for iPad, yeah,
right. And I've heard Transmit is still working to a degree for people, but it hasn't been updated in a long time. Plus, Clear, which is a task manager, which is still living kind of a zombie life in perpetual test flight betas, I think, for some people. but it hasn't really been updated publicly in a very long time. And then there's Copied. Remember Copied? That was a clipboard manager for the iPhone.
Yeah, not clear to me what happened to Copied.
There's a story behind that. There was some legal stuff going on behind the scenes that I don't know that I can really share the details of. But there were some things happening behind the scenes on that one. Yes.
Really? You got to tell me on iMessage.
Yeah, there were some things going on behind the scenes there, and the app had to be retired. And then finally, also, there's TapBot's ConvertBot. Because remember when TapBots had lots of bots?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, there have been a lot of converter apps over the years, but ConvertBot was definitely one of the early ones.
Well, and I will follow up to that by mentioning PasteBot, which I think it's still around on the Mac, but PasteBot for iOS is no longer with us. I actually remember when TapBots tried to launch PasteBot on iOS, and of course there were background limitations, right? In terms of what if you want to monitor your clipboard in the background. And so TapBots, like many others at the time, thought, well, what if we play a silent song in the background that forces the app to stay active, even if it's not running in the foreground anymore?
Yeah, that's something that Facebook decided was a really good idea to do too at some point, remember?
And Apple, of course, shut down that option. And, and of course, I still think it should be possible to have a real clipboard manager on iOS. And hey, maybe next year, if Apple is forced by the European Union to open up site loading and private APIs on iOS, maybe that'll finally be a reality. But yes. All right. There's a bunch of others that I want to mention. I want to stay in Macland for a couple of minutes here. Allow me.
All right.
There's a trio that I want to cover. Adium for chats.
Yes.
Do you remember Adium with the duck?
Yeah,
the icon with the duck.
Yeah.
With the green duck, and you could customize the color of the duck. And I think I had like a yellow duck. Adium was great. You could have IRC, iChat, like it was like all in one.
Yeah, it didn't have like AOL built into it.
AOL, yeah. Adium was great. I don't know what happened to it. Another one that was like the hot thing for a while, Bowtie. Do you remember Bowtie?
No, I never used Bowtie. I don't know this app at all.
It was a music desktop widget, and it was highly themable. you could download the themes for Bowtie from, this is like, I'm sure there's two people in the audience that will remember this. That was the whole, let me know on Mastodon if you remember this. This was the era of Mac themes. Do you remember the Mac themes forums?
Oh yeah, I do remember that. Yeah,
and then there was like at the time there was like the competition between Mac themes, and there was this other invite only forum called Macristocracy.
Yeah, you told me about this before, and I had no idea about this one. And I know that I think we linked to it somewhere at some point.
Yeah. It was a thing. It was a thing at the time, and people would share themes for Bowtie, for example, amongst other things. It was obviously, while I'm talking about this, just came to mind. Speaking of UI customization from a decade ago on macOS 10, Candy Bar. Do you remember Candy Bar?
Oh yeah,
Candy Bar was great. It allowed you to customize all your icons very nicely, and people would share these themes and icons on Mac themes and Macristocracy. Beautiful time. I remember at one point I made my entire MacBook black and white. I customized the Aqua UI to be like monochromatic. I changed all of my dock icons to black and white versions. Lasted about a day, and then I realized, what have I done? Anyway, Bowtie was great. Font case.
Yeah, this is a beautiful app.
There is a font case today on iPhone and iPad, but it's not what I'm referring to. Font case for Mac, and I'm going to give you a bunch of context here, was made by Bohemian Coding. Mm-hmm. The person behind Bohemian Coding, Peter Omvley, is now the co-founder, and CEO, president of Sketch. You know Sketch, Sketch for Mac, the graphic design app. And yes, before Sketch, there was Fontcase. And Fontcase version 2, beautiful, absolutely gorgeous app to preview fonts and just to play around with typography on your Mac. It was like font book on steroids. It was beautiful. I remember having this like iTunes-like UI for browsing your fonts and having previews and different weights and sizes. It was terrific. I loved Fontcase. It was great. And let's see, do I have anything else on the Mac from that era? No, I don't think I do.
I don't think so. I think we need to move into some entertainment apps. But before we do that, I do want to call out one that we should have mentioned when we covered the gone but not forgotten apps from Apple, which is the iPhone 4 case program app.
Yes.
Because
Sorry, Apple, we forgot.
I know. I was scrolling back through my iOS library, and I found that back in my purchase history. And this is the app that Apple put out when they had AntennaGate. AntennaGate, the conclusion of it was everybody got themselves a free bumper case for around the edge of their iPhone so they wouldn't block the antennas and drop their phone calls. And to get that case, you had to download the iPhone 4 case program app and ask for your case that way. I don't know if that's because the Apple Store app didn't exist yet or why it was done as a one-off app like that, but very strange app.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what a weird time.
Yeah, it was a very weird time. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Issue. Whether you work for yourself or you're part of a team, it's time to get creative. Make your online presence and your business stand out from the pack with Issue. Issue is an all-in-one platform to create and distribute beautiful digital content. From marketing materials and magazines to catalogs and portfolios, and so much more. There's no need for endless scrolling through PDFs either. Issue features your digital content in an easy-to-view way on every single device you've got. Make it once, distribute it anywhere without reformatting. Your content is automatically optimized for engagement and ready to share, which will save you a ton of time. Issue also works seamlessly with the tools you're already using, things like Canva, Dropbox, MailChimp, and InDesign. I really like this tool because it's so simple to use. It's a really simple web app. You can use the documents you've already created for other purposes by uploading them from places like Dropbox or Google Drive, or you can use one of their handcrafted templates, which is a great way to get started. Just download the template, edit it, and get going from there. It takes a lot of the guesswork and a lot of the browsing out of the process of creating marketing materials, which helps you stop procrastinating about doing the marketing that you need to do and get the documents ready and out there for people to see. Content on Issue can be published as public or private. With a private-only link, only users with the link can view it. And public content will be available for your entire audience, and it's available for others to discover on the Issue platform itself. This is cool. The platform also provides statistics on how your content is being consumed so you can learn more about your audience, with data on impressions, clicks on the content, duration spent reading, and pages viewed, and a whole lot more. Issue helps creators, marketers, designers, and really anyone who wants to make content that stands out on the web. Get started with Issue today for free, or sign up for an annual premium account and get 50% off when you go to issue.com/appstories. That's issue, ISSUU.com/appstories for your free starter account or 50% off an annual premium account. One more time, that's issue.com/appstories. Our thanks to Issue for their support of the show. All right, Federico, we're going to close out the episode, by the way, with some games, but I want to go to entertainment stuff and talk to you about Instacast because
Instacast. Okay.
There is Instacast and Instacast HD. I mean, this is HD is something we should have an aside about because
I love this.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you go back in the history of the App Store, you will find a lot of old apps from the 2010 to 2013 era. They're all named HD because that was kind of the designation that it was an iPad app, because for some reason we all decided, or all the developers decided, that the iPad was an HD thing. And so that...
Have I ever told you the story of how this all started?
No.
All right. Okay. So in the beginning, Mac Stories, I was trying to have it be like a rumor website. It started in 2009, 2010. And I was trying my hand at being like breaking news and having scoops and whatnot.
Oh, I know this story you're going to tell me. Go ahead, though. This is a good story.
So when Apple announced the iPad, they announced the iPad in January of 2010. And they said it's going to launch in April. Through some ways that I don't remember, a couple of weeks before the iPad's release date, which I believe was set for April 3rd, a person got in touch with me and they were like, hey, I don't want to go into the details of how I know about this or where exactly I work, but if you want, here's a URL for you if you want to access the iPad App Store early. And sure enough, I get this link. I open this link and I'm into the iPad App Store from a web browser, like on my Mac.
Yeah.
And so for an entire week, I was able to sift through all of these apps that were going to launch with the iPad on April 3rd. And I took screenshots of everything. And I started like posting about like each of these apps on Mac Stories and getting a lot of page views.
Oh, I bet.
And something I noticed is that all of these versions were called HD. And so basically like that became a thing where I noticed first that all of these apps were called something HD. And it just became one of those things that because other people were doing it, then more developers started doing it and became like this cycle of like,
right.
Well, I guess I'm calling my app HD. And so for a few years there, all iPad versions of existing iPhone apps were called, app name HD. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great story. I actually had one of those URLs at one point too for a much less famous store. There are, I think, URLs for all of the app stores. And I think that they're like URLs that basically show things as they're entered into the system, kind of like a chronological feed of the apps on the iPad. In any event, getting back to Instacast. Instacast was a fantastic podcast player. It was the one that I used, I guess, first, I believe, and used for a really long time. I mean, it was probably the most robust feature set of any of the podcast players that were out there until Overcast came along, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so.
I really
very
don't know what
least
happened to it. It just the developer just stopped developing it, I believe. I don't really know.
Yeah, I don't know the details. I think maybe I do remember there being like a business model issue between Instacast version 2 and the migration to Instacast 3. And by the time Instacast 3 launched, there was a lot more competition on the market, maybe. And also, I'm sure that Apple coming out with its podcast app, also, having that kind of minimal, set of functionalities, I'm sure that it didn't help Instacast. Which, unlike Overcast, was not differentiated by having like the audio effects. So yeah, I don't exactly recall what happened. And I think the developers tried to build like a donation model for Instacast, and it didn't work. But yeah, I don't recall the details.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we take a lot of these features for granted now, but it had like a popover that would show you the progress of your downloads if you were downloading multiple episodes. It had full show note support with links, a lot of things that Apple's app didn't have out of the box. And it used heavy use of these popovers that are very 3D compared to the popovers that you're used to today. But it was a way to browse the catalog of shows and episodes and to access various features. And it was a great app.
Yeah.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your business online. You can stand out with a beautiful website, engage with your audience, and sell anything, your products, services, and even the content you create. Squarespace has you covered with it all. With Squarespace, you can use insights to grow your business. If you've ever wondered where people are coming from who visit your site, or where your sales are coming from, and what channels are most effective, you could analyze and get answers to all of that with Squarespace. Once you've got that data, you can improve your website and build a marketing strategy based on your top keywords or most popular products and content. You can also use Squarespace to start an online store. Whether you sell physical or digital products, Squarespace has the tools that you need to get started selling online. And you can even stand out in people's inboxes with Squarespace email campaigns. Why not encourage your visitors to sign up as email subscribers and start them on a journey of becoming loyal customers? Just start with an email template and customize it by applying your brand ingredients like site colors and logo. Plus, built-in analytics measure the impact of every single message you send. Creating a strong brand is important when you're starting out online. I know when I got started selling apps, the first thing I did was set up a Squarespace site because they made it so easy to get a great landing page that described exactly what my app did and to send people to the App Store to buy it. It was a perfect way to get started because I wasn't a web developer. I didn't want to have to hassle with that. Putting together an app by itself was more than enough work for me. When with Squarespace in my corner, I was able to create a site quickly that looked professional and helped me drive sales of my app. So if you're selling anything online, I highly suggest you go on over to squarespace.com/appstories to set up a free trial today with no credit card required. And when you're ready to launch, just use the offer code AppStories to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Again, that URL is squarespace.com/appstories. And when you decide to sign up and use that offer code, it's AppStories, AppStories, to get 10% off your first purchase. And by doing that, you'll also be showing your support for App Stories. Our thanks to Squarespace for the support of the show.
Does what can I cover here? Let's see. Did we cover Mr. Reader?
No, we didn't. We should do that one.
I mean, I guess it it's okay for the entertainment section. Mr. Reader was an RSS app, an RSS reader, with a weird icon.
Some would say it was a creepy icon.
It was a guy with a mustache, but the guy had the RSS symbol for its eyes and a top hat. Yeah, it's
and a monocle, I think.
And a monocle, yeah, it was an odd icon for real. But the thing about Mr. Reader was that it was one of the first apps to be truly customizable. And it was one of the first, I believe it was actually the first app to implement its own services menu on iOS and for iPhone and iPad, to basically make you create your own custom extensions, powered, of course, by URL schemes. This is the era of Launch Center Pro, the first versions of drafts, as we were talking in the segment that we did for Greg Pierce for MacStory Selects 2022. And Mr. Reader and the custom services menu was basically the precursor to the share sheet and having your shortcut, your workflows, and then your shortcuts in the share sheet. That was basically the same idea. You could make your own custom actions with variables inside Mr. Reader and then put them in a custom share sheet that allowed you to say, pass an article to drafts or send the selection from a story from Mr. Reader to, I don't know, editorial. Like that was a thing that I was doing at the time. And yeah, that was a great app, weird icon, but still incredible piece of software for its time.
Yeah, we heard from a lot of listeners too who missed that one as well. I think it was definitely a popular one. We should talk about too ProTube, because ProTube, right? Yes. This was a YouTube player, and you might wonder what the deal is with third-party YouTube players. Well, that was a thing back in the day. YouTube basically has stamped them all out of existence by changing the way their APIs work. But ProTube was just a way, a third-party way to watch YouTube. And could you download from ProTube? I think you could.
You could.
Right? Yeah,
yes.
You could download directly the videos onto your device. It had a much cleaner UI. A lot of the junkiness of YouTube was gone from it, and it also it managed to get rid of some of the advertising and things around the edges of the app, which I'm sure YouTube didn't appreciate, and so that's one reason I'm sure they got rid of it, as well as the programmatic ads. I guess were also not in there either.
Yeah, and I mean, we cannot skip on these other apps in the entertainment section. I need to mention RDO.
Oh, yeah. Beautiful app.
Beautiful app. It was the only, I think in hindsight, it's the only music streaming service that I loved. Like that I truly loved. It was called RDO without the A. It's just, it's a funny name. It was great. It was the first streaming service to be focused on beautiful design, curation, a very clean UI. Yeah, and it was eventually bought by Pandora and shut down. I don't know what happened to the people who founded and were working on RDO, but they had all these features for curations and playlists and like putting the spotlight on artists without all the junk that Spotify. This is before Apple Music, of course. This is right about the time. This is from many years ago. Now, when Apple bought a radio service called Lala, I remember. Apple acquired this music radio service called Lala, and eventually that became the foundation for Apple Music. But at the time, it was just Spotify, and Spotify initially was Europe only.
Lala is a very deep cut, Federico, because before they were a radio service, they shipped you CDs in the mail.
Wow.
Just like Netflix. And this is something I used to do. It was like a trading service. You would make certain of your CDs available, and you could then get CDs back in the mail and then rip them, of course. And that's how I grew my music collection in, I don't know,
let's see,
2005 or 4.
December 5, 2009, Apple has acquired Lala. This is from TechCrunch.
I'm pretty sure that's the same Lala that was doing CD trading even before that. So,
yeah, upstart online music retailer called Lala Media.
Yeah. And then I think they also sold CDs. Like, I think some of them, they ended up having their own catalog, I believe. It was very much like Netflix in a lot of ways, but for music. All right. I want to mention Articles by Sophistication, which was Sophia Teichler, if I'm pronouncing her last name right, who was eventually hired by Apple.
I think she's still at Apple.
I think so too. She did Articles, which was a Wikipedia app on
Beautiful
the iPhone. Just
Wikipedia.
absolutely beautiful design. I think she works on maybe the frameworks team at Apple, if I remember right. But she did that one. She did Cover Sutra, which was a Mac app that had basically cover art for your music as you were playing it in iTunes. And another good iOS app called Groceries, one of the early grocery list apps on the App Store. So all those were beautifully designed and a lot of fun.
This is not about apps, but before we talk about games, to close out the episode very quickly, do you remember, it used to be a thing in our community at the time, do you remember the Mac heists?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a real throwback.
And it was basically like this giveaway that was organized by this company and this guy, I don't remember his name, and there was some controversy eventually about this company. That was 10 years ago, so I'm sorry if I don't remember the details. But for a while, it was a thing, and it was like a game that you needed to play, like some quizzes that you needed to answer, and you would answer the quiz, and you would find the clues, and you could be part of the Mac heist to basically get a bunch of apps for free.
It still exists. I just opened the website.
Really?
Yeah, but it's selling gifts for him, gifts for her, gifts under $25. But then they also are selling Microsoft Office. Okay. I don't know. It's a little weird. Yeah. It's not what it was. What you're talking about by any stretch.
Oh no! This is very different from what it used to be. Yeah, that's not what I'm referring to.
No, this was more of an indie software sale program, basically.
All right, give me some games.
All right, some games. We got a bunch from listeners, but one of the ones that I really miss is Rolando. Rolando still exists on the store as the Royal Edition, which was kind of like a remaster, I think, of the original game. But there were sequels to Rolando. There was at least two sequels to it, and you controlled these little ball guys that they're round, and you use, if I remember right, the sensors in the iPhone to roll them along, and it was a platformer. It was really nice artwork and a fun game, and one of the top hits in the early App Store, but it just kind of fell by the wayside. And a lot of these apps that we're going to talk about, or games we're going to talk about, a lot of them don't exist anymore because of the transition from 32-bit to 64-bit apps. Which left a lot of games behind that hadn't been updated since they were first released. I also want to mention Jellycar, because Jellycar was one of these. It was this, this like hand-drawn car that you would drive around on the iPhone through all kinds of incredible, obstacle courses and things. And it had just really weird, bouncy physics that I think grabbed a lot of people. And it had a couple of sequels too. What's neat about it is last year in December, Apple brought it back as part of Apple Arcade. And I think Apple is doing a nice job of bringing back some of these classics through Arcade. And Jellycar, I have not played the new version yet, which I believe is called Jellycar Worlds, but the originals were a lot of fun. I know my kids sure killed a lot of time with those games.
Can I get the very last one?
Sure.
Can I do it? I mean, I have to. Like, it wouldn't be a proper Gone But Not Forgotten episode without mentioning, of course, the one and only Flappy Bird.
Of course, Flappy Bird.
Enough said, right? We all know Flappy Bird. What a weird story.
What a phenomenon, right?
What a phenomenon at the time. Arguably, by all means, a bad game that still became this massive phenomenon. A really hard game, which the guy who made it recognized that it was like a bad thing for people, pulled the game from the App Store and never came back. I believe the guy was named Dong Win, never came back with another game. It's like, I realize it's like, I didn't want this game to take off as much as it did. I recognize that it's bad for people. I don't wanna make any more money off of this. I'm done. And it was like this meteoric rise that then just
he pieced out just like that. Yeah, it was
like, I'm out, folks. Bye.
It was probably one of the most viral games ever on the App Store. I think that's not overstating it. It was literally everywhere all of a sudden, and people were playing it just everywhere. I'm going to run down just a handful of names that we also heard from listeners about. Flight Control, very popular. Super Monkey Ball, one of the probably the very first game on the App Store because it was part of the announcement of the App Store. Tap Tap Revenge, which had a whole series of games with popular songs that you would sing along to or tap along to. And Triss. Those are and Infinity Blade by Epic, of course, who is now the arch enemy of Apple, I suppose. but Infinity Blade was a whole series as well, which used to get trotted out at events, keynotes all the time.
Yep. Yeah.
All right, Federico. Well, that's it for Gone But Not Forgotten for now. Who knows? Maybe we'll revisit this series again sometime in the future. It's been an awful lot of fun. I want to thank our 3 sponsors again for this episode. That's Pillow, ZocDoc, Issue, and Squarespace. You can find me and Federico over on Mastodon. Federico is at Vitici there. And you can find us on Instagram, where Federico is at Vitici and I'm at John Voorhees. And of course, always on MacStories.net. I'll talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.